Every family has its secrets, but I never imagined ours would lead me down a path I could never come back from. Growing up, Thanksgiving at my grandparents' house was a tradition as solid as the old oak table we gathered around. The smell of turkey and stuffing, the sound of football on TV, Uncle Tim's terrible jokes that somehow got worse every year. But there was always something that fell off, something I couldn't quite name as a kid. It wasn't until I was 19, home from my first semester at State, that I finally understood what had been nagging at me all those years. The empty plate. It sat there every single Thanksgiving, right between Grandma's seat and where Uncle Tim always positioned himself at the corner. A full place setting. Plate, silverware, napkin folded into a triangle the way Grandma insisted on doing for everyone. Even a glass of water that would sit untouched through the entire meal, condensation pooling around its base. When I was 7, I asked Mom about it. We were in the kitchen, and she was helping Grandma mash potatoes. The question just tumbled out of me with that innocent curiosity kids have before they learn some questions shouldn't be asked. Who's that plate for? Mom's hands had frozen mid-stir. Grandma's back went rigid at the stove. The kitchen, which had been full of warmth and chatter just seconds before, suddenly felt like someone had opened a window in the middle of winter. It's for the one who's missing, Mom finally said, her voice tight. Then, before I could ask anything else, she handed me the potato masher and told me to go wash up for dinner. Subject closed. I asked twice more over the years. Once when I was 12 and again at 15. Both times I got the same treatment. Deflection, subject change, and a look from Mom that told me I was treading on sacred, painful ground. So I did what kids do. I created my own explanation. Great uncle, somebody who died in a war. A grandparent I never met. Some family member taken too soon, memorialized in the way families do when grief is too heavy to speak aloud. But that explanation never quite fit. There was something about the way the adults acted around that empty plate. How Uncle Tim would sometimes stare at it during grace, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles working. How Grandpa would reach out once or twice during the meal, his hand hovering over the empty chair as if he might touch someone sitting there, before pulling back and taking a long drink of whatever was in his glass. The fall I turned 19, I came home from college with a head full of critical thinking and research skills from my freshman comp classes. I'd spent months learning how to dig into sources, how to find information that wasn't immediately obvious. It probably made me cocky. It definitely made me reckless. That Thanksgiving, I watched everyone more carefully. Really watched. Mom kept glancing at the empty plate like it might suddenly disappear if she didn't keep an eye on it. Uncle Tim drank more than usual, his face getting redder with each glass of wine. And Grandma, normally the anchor of every family gathering, seemed diminished somehow. Smaller, like she was carrying a weight that was slowly crushing her into the earth. After dinner, while everyone was in the living room pretending to watch football and actually just falling into food comas, I cornered Grandma in the kitchen. She was wrapping leftovers, her gnarled hands working with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. Grandma, I need to know about the empty plate. Her hands still. She didn't turn around. You're grown now. I continued, trying to keep my voice gentle but firm. I'm not a kid anymore. I deserve to know what this family secret is. Some things are better left alone, sweetheart. Her voice was barely a whisper. Is it for someone who died? Please, just stop poking around. The way she said it, the tremor in her voice, it wasn't grief. It was fear. And that's when I knew this wasn't about honoring a dead relative. This was about something else entirely. Something that had kept my family in chains for years. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my childhood bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck to the ceiling in middle school, and I made a decision. I was going to find out the truth. The next morning, while everyone was still recovering from turkey comas, I went up to the attic. Our attic was like most family attics, a graveyard of memories and abandoned hobbies. Christmas decorations, old furniture, boxes of photographs, and papers that nobody had looked at in decades. I started with the photo boxes, working methodically through years of family history. I found it in a box labeled 1990 to 1995 in Mom's handwriting. A photograph, slightly faded, taken at what was clearly a Thanksgiving dinner. I recognized the dining room, the same oak table, even some of the same decorations Grandma still used. The photo showed the whole family, younger versions of everyone I knew. And there, standing between a teenage Uncle Tim and a woman I didn't recognize, was a boy. He looked about 13, skinny and dark-haired, wearing a flannel shirt that was slightly too big for him. But it was his face that made my heart stop. He looked exactly like Uncle Tim. Same nose, same Same set to the jaw, same deep-set eyes. Brothers, clearly, or at least close relatives. I'd never seen this boy before in my life. I turned the photo over. In faded pencil, someone had written, Thanksgiving 1992, everyone together. I stared at that word. Everyone. Who was this kid? Why had he been erased from every other family photo, every family story? I took the photo downstairs, my hand shaking slightly. Mom was in the kitchen making her third cup of coffee, still in her bathrobe. When I slid the photo across the counter to her, the color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. Where did you find this? Her voice was barely audible. The attic. Who is he, Mom? She picked up the photo with trembling hands, staring at it like it was a ghost made solid. We don't talk about Kyle. Kyle who? Just drop it, honey. Please. For me, just drop it. No. I surprised myself with the firmness in my voice. I'm not a kid anymore. You can't just shut me down. Who is Kyle? Mom set down the photo and gripped the edge of the counter. For a long moment, I thought she might actually tell me. Her mouth opened, closed, open again. Then she shook her head. He was my cousin. He's gone. That's all you need to know. Gone where? Please stop asking questions. But I couldn't. The photo had opened something in me, a need to understand that had been building for years. That afternoon, I told Mom I was going to meet up with some high school friends. Instead, I drove to the county records office. The woman at the desk was helpful, showing me how to search the newspaper archives on microfiche. It took me 2 hours of scrolling through old newspapers, my eyes burning from a screen before I found it. The article was small, buried on page 7 of the local paper from November 28, 1993, the day after Thanksgiving. Local teen missing after family dispute. Kyle Watson, 13, was reported missing Saturday morning by his parents, Robert and Linda Watson. Kyle was last seen Friday evening during Thanksgiving dinner at his grandparents' home on Maple Street. According to family members, Kyle had an argument with his older brother, Timothy Watson, 17, and left the house around 8:30 p.m. He has not been seen since. Kyle is described as 5 feet 4 inches, approximately 110 pounds, with dark hair and brown eyes. He was wearing a blue flannel shirt and jeans. Anyone with information is asked to contact the sheriff's department. My hand was shaking so badly, I had to grip the edge of the desk. Kyle Watson. Timothy Watson, Uncle Tim's brother, a brother who had disappeared during Thanksgiving dinner and was never mentioned again. I scrolled forward, looking for follow-up articles. There were 3 more over the next 2 weeks. The police had searched the woods behind my grandparents' house. They'd interviewed the family. The working theory was that Kyle had run away after the fight with his brother, possibly hitchhiked out of town. Zuna Waitin, case went cold. No body ever found. But it was a line in the second article that made my blood turn to ice. Several neighbors reported hearing screaming from the wooded area behind the Watson property around 9 p.m. on Friday evening. Police searched the area, but found no evidence of foul play. Screaming, not shouting, not arguing, screaming. I printed every article I could find and drove home in a daze. That night, I lay in bed reading them over and over, try to piece together what might have happened. A 13-year-old boy gets into a fight with his older brother. He storms out of the house. And then what? He just disappears, and the family never speaks of him again. They don't put up missing person posters, don't make appeals for information, don't even acknowledge he existed. Instead, they set an empty plate at Thanksgiving dinner every year. A memorial or a reminder, or maybe something else entirely. A way to keep the secret present, to never let themselves forget what happened in those woods behind Grandma's house. Over the next few days, I became obsessed. I drove by my grandparents' old house, which they'd sold 10 years ago when they moved to a smaller place across town. I walked the property line, peering into the woods that stretched behind it. They weren't deep woods, just a few acres of trees before you hit the next development. But they were thick enough, dark enough, that a 13-year-old boy could disappear into them and never be found. I started talking to old neighbors, the ones who'd been there in 1993. Most didn't remember much, or claim they did. But Mrs. Chun, who still lived 3 houses down from my grandparents' old place, remembered. "Oh, that was awful," she said, shaking her head as we stood on her porch. She'd invited me in for tea when I explained I was doing a family history project. That poor boy. The whole family was devastated. "Do you remember anything about that night?" She frowned, thinking back. "Well, there was a lot of commotion. Police cars, search parties, and the smell. A few days after he disappeared. This awful smell coming from somewhere in the woods. Like something died. We thought maybe it was a deer or something. It lasted about a week, then went away. I remember because my husband wanted to call animal control, but by the time he got around to it, the smell was gone. My stomach turned. Did you tell the police?" I think someone did. They searched the woods again, but they said they didn't find anything. Just nature being nature, I guess. I talked to 2 other neighbors from that time. One didn't remember much, but Mr. Garrison, who'd lived next door, remembered something else. Tim and his father had a huge bonfire that night, he told me. I remember because it was raining. Cold rain, Miserable night. But they were out there in the backyard, burning something. Kept that fire going for hours. I thought it was strange at the time, but figured they were just dealing with stress in their own way. People do odd things when they're upset. A bonfire. In the rain. The night Kyle disappeared. I went home and looked at the articles again. The timeline was there if you knew what to look for. Kyle left the house around 8:30. Neighbors heard screaming around 9 o'clock. The bonfire would have been later, maybe 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, after the police had come and gone, after they'd filed the initial missing person report and started the search. What burns a bonfire? Wood, yes, but also evidence, clothing, anything you might need to make disappear. I knew I should go to the police, but with what? 30-year-old newspaper articles and the suspicions of a 19-year-old who just discovered a family secret? They'd already investigated. They'd already decided Kyle was a runaway. And my family, my Uncle Tim, he'd been 17 at the time. Legally still a minor for most purposes. Even if something had happened, even if there'd been some kind of accident or fight that went too far, the statute of limitations on anything but murder would be long expired. But murder, that doesn't expire. That follows you forever. That keeps you setting empty plates at Thanksgiving dinner for 30 years. Thanksgiving came around again. I'd been home from college for a week, and the tension in the house was palpable. Mom knew I'd been digging into the past. She'd found the newspaper articles in my room, and we'd had a screaming fight about it. Why can't you just let it go? She cried. Why do you have to destroy this family? The family was already destroyed, Mom. In 1993. I'm just trying to understand what happened. Some things are better left buried. That phrase, buried. The word choice felt deliberate, and it made my skin crawl. The day before Thanksgiving, I made a decision. I was going to confront them. All of them. I was going to demand the truth. Thanksgiving dinner started normally enough. Turkey, stuffing, all the traditional dishes, and the empty plate sitting there like it had for 3 decades. But this year, I couldn't take my eyes off it. Kyle's plate. The memorial to a 13-year-old boy who'd been erased from family history. We were halfway through dinner when I set down my fork. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I want to talk about Kyle. The effect was immediate. Uncle Tim's face went red. Mom closed her eyes. Grandma made a small sound like she'd been punched. Grandpa just stared at his plate. Not this again. Uncle Tim said, his voice dangerous. I thought we told you to drop it. A boy disappeared from this house 30 years ago. Your brother. And nobody talks about it. You just set an empty plate every year and pretend that's enough. Well, it's not enough. I want to know what happened to Kyle. He ran away. Uncle Tim said flatly. End of story. Did he? Because I've read the newspaper articles. I've talked to the neighbors. Mrs. Chun remembers a smell from the woods. Mr. Garrison remembers you and Grandpa having a bonfire that night in the rain. Uncle Tim stood up so fast his chair fell backward. You little. He slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes jump. You have no idea what you're talking about. No idea what that little brat was like. What he put this family through. Tim, Grandpa's voice was quiet but firm. Sit down. No, I'm done with this. Done with the guilt. Done with the empty plate. Done with pretending. Uncle Tim was shaking, his face purple with rage or fear or both. She wants to know what happened? Fine. Kyle was a troubled kid. He had problems. Anger issues. He came at me with a knife that night. A knife. What was I supposed to do? Tim, shut up. Mom's voice was sharp with panic. But Uncle Tim was past stopping. 30 years of secrets were pouring out of him like poison from a wound. It was self-defense. He attacked me. We fought. And yes, we went into the woods. And yes, things went too far. But it was an accident. An accident. The room was dead silent. Even the football game on TV seemed to have gone quiet. Where is he? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Where is Kyle? Uncle Tim looked at me, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes that terrified me. Not remorse. Not guilt. Just cold, flat calculation. Where he can't hurt anyone anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, replaying Uncle Tim's words over and over. An accident. Self-defense. But if it was really an accident, why hide it? Why not call the police, explain what happened? Why burn evidence and let everyone think Kyle ran away? I heard voices downstairs around 2 a.m. I crept to the top of the stairs and listened. If she keeps digging, she'll ruin everything. That was Uncle Tim. The police will reopen the case. They'll search the property. Do you understand what that means? What do you want us to do? Mom's voice was thick with tears. She's my daughter. That little brat got what was coming to him. He was going to destroy this family. I did what I had to do. And I'll be damned if I let your daughter undo 30 years of keeping us safe. Are you threatening her? Mom's voice rose. Are you threatening my daughter? I'm saying she needs to understand the consequences of stirring up the past. For everyone. I'd heard enough. I went back to my room, locked the door, and didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, I packed my bags and told Mom I was going back to school early. Please don't go like this, she begged. Please. Did you know? I asked her when it happened. Did you know? She couldn't meet my eyes. That was answer enough. I was scared, she whispered. We were all scared. Tim said it was an accident. Dad said we had to protect the family. And Kyle was already gone. Nothing we did could bring him back. So you just buried him and moved on. We've never moved on. She gestured to the dining room. where the table was still set from last night. The empty plate was gone. Someone had cleared it away in the night. That plate has been there every year. Every single year. We've never forgotten. We've never stopped carrying it. Guilt isn't the same as justice, Mom. I drove back to school that afternoon. The next day, Mom called to tell me they'd decided not to do Thanksgiving anymore. The tradition was over. The empty plate would be packed away with the other things the family didn't talk about. I spent weeks trying to decide what to do. Go to the police? But with what evidence? A 30-year-old cold case and the ramblings of a man who'd been drinking? My family would deny everything. Uncle Tim would claim I'd misunderstood, that he'd been speaking hypothetically, that I was a troubled kid trying to cause problems. And maybe they'd be right. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe Kyle really did run away. And Uncle Tim's confession was just the guilt-fueled fantasy of a man who'd spent 30 years wondering if he could have stopped his brother from leaving. But I don't think so. I think about Mrs. Chen's smell. I think about the bonfire in the rain. I think about the empty plate, set every year like a shrine, or a confession, or a warning. Most of all, I think about Kyle Watson, 13 years old, who got into a fight with his brother one Thanksgiving night and was never seen again. Who became a runaway in the official record and a secret in his family's heart. Who was remembered with an empty plate and forgotten in every other way that mattered. Last week, I got a call from Mom. Grandpa died. Heart attack. The funeral is next week. She wants me to come home. She says the family needs to heal, to come together, to move forward. I haven't decided if I'm going yet, because here's what I keep thinking about. If I go to that funeral, if I stand there with Uncle Tim and Mom and Grandma, if I let this secret stay buried with Grandpa, then I'm part of it too. I become another person who chose family over truth, silence over justice. But if I don't go, if I finally go to the police with what I know, then I destroy what's left of my family. I turn my uncle into a murder suspect. I make my mother an accomplice. I tear apart the lives of everyone I've ever loved. So I sit here in my dorm room, staring at that old photograph of Kyle Watson in his too big flannel shirt, and I try to decide what the right thing is. Because there's no good answer here. No choice that doesn't leave someone buried, either in the ground or under the weight of secrets. The empty plate is gone now. The tradition is over. But the question remains, sitting at the table of my conscience like a ghost that won't leave. What do you do when your family's love is built on someone else's grave? I still don't know, but I think about Kyle Watson every day. And I wonder if, somewhere in the woods behind my grandparents' old house, there's a 13-year-old boy who's been waiting 30 years for someone to tell his story. Maybe that someone is me. If you enjoyed this story, like and subscribe for more tales that will keep you up at night.